two to three things that I would really be looking into. Like first, trial to purchase rate is low. Is it caused by the voluntary or involuntary churn? Because these two groups, completely different sets of solutions, right? I see roughly 4 cases when lowering the price makes sense. The first one is when you're charging something that is way off the mental category into which you're falling into the customer's head.
Hey there. Today we're joined by Ekaterina Gamsriegler. Ekaterina is currently head of growth and marketing at My Group. She previously led marketing at Mimo, and she scaled products to 30 million plus users and over 20 million ARR. She was named by Amplitude as a top growth product leader. And as always, we're talking through real tactical guidance and examples from her career. You'll learn why growth does not start with an MMP. Think product analytics instead. How to break down KPIs into controllable inputs, and why breaking things down gets you 80% of the way to solving your growth challenges. The onboarding length versus paywall exposure trade-off, how to diagnose low trial start rates, and the real reasons users cancel trials, when lowering prices is actually the right move, and why pricing problems are often storytelling problems. Let's dive in. Hey, Katerina, thanks for joining us today. You recently gave a presentation at Growth Festival, features a Growth Festival conference, and one of the core messages was growth is figure outable. One, I love that message because it gives us all hope. But what do you think the most important steps are to figuring out your growth? Where do we start?
Hi, Jacob. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invite. Yes, indeed. I also think it's a pretty nice message and mantra to do growth by. But I think for me, there are maybe 3 core steps which I would say should get you there. 2 of them already should get you there, like 80–90% of the way. So first, I would say that you definitely need somewhat reliable, maybe not perfect, map of your user behavior and how your users behave and convert. So for me, growth does not start with implementing an MMP. It does start with implementing a product analytics tool, which shows you what your users are doing in the app after the install. High-level metrics like performance of your ads or how users behave in the stores, you can also, of course, find in other tools. But overall, this picture of what happens from ad impression, if you're running paid ads, or maybe from the store listing visit and impression to conversion, does not have to be perfect, but it has to be there. And after this, I would say another critical step would be to break things down. So we all have a set of KPIs in mind. We might have North Star metrics, we might have different ways of setting the goals. But usually each of the metrics can be broken down further into different inputs. And I think this is often the step that teams and also companies might be missing out on. So if, for example, you again are running paid acquisition and you see in a certain week that your CPIs go up, sometimes it's very easy to say, oh, CPIs go up, let's fix the budgets, let's decrease the spend, instead of really looking deeper, figuring out what's happening, because there are also like a lot of parts that contribute or can contribute to CPIs going down, starting with CPMs and how heated the auction is, or if there is any seasonality outside, and ending with conversion from click to download, which has a lot to do with how your store listings look like. Are you using CPPs and custom store listings or not? And overall, and click-through rates, of course, very important part. Are your creative concepts still performing? Is the performance getting worse over time? And everything that actually contributes to that. So every metric can be broken down, and I think it's critical to separate these inputs that you have or don't have the control over. And additionally, you can also add this extra level like of complexity, but it's actually not complexity. It's very helpful instead. It's that you also break down by attributes. So you see what's happening, and then you try to understand if the trends are the same and like hold across platforms, geos, channels, etc. Right? Yeah, this would be my step number 2. Break things down, see like across different attributes what's where exactly in which segment the problem is, and this is where I would say 80% of success already lies, because the last step here in, I don't know, my mental mental model is to think of the solutions and prioritize those after. So once you see which of the inputs for the KPIs is the problem and which of the segments or channels or like attributes is the problem, then you can find the solutions. Personally, I've never seen a team or a company where there would not be enough ideas for solutions, to be completely honest. So I think here prioritization, like really ruthless prioritization, keeping the focus and saying no to things becomes a very, very critical thing. And regardless of the company size, it doesn't matter. I think like if you are a team of 20 or if you're a team of 200 or 2000, there is never enough resources to test this. I think everybody can try to create a ticket for a data analysis team or for the product team and see what happens, and how soon it gets prioritized and done. So my point here is there are a lot of things to fix. There are a lot of ideas and solutions, but it's really a skill to learn and train of like focusing on the 2-3 core problems, each of which has 2 to 3 tactics with maybe the highest confidence that can move the needle right now. So yeah, it's about knowing what to fix first, having a high certainty, somewhat high certainty in the solutions, and keeping the focus on those.
Yeah. So let's unpack some of that because I think we can kind of build a whole career, a whole growth team off everything in there. So that was awesome. So starting off, we have to understand what's going on in terms of product analytics, and I think that's a great take of product analytics tool is probably more important than your MMP to start, especially in this modern mobile marketing world where MMPs are quickly decreasing in value and the value offered.
Sorry to break up the flow. In addition to hosting the Price Power podcast, I'm also the founder and CEO of Botsy. Botsy is AI pricing for your subscription app. We train a custom AI model on your data and figure out the right price, product, or paywall to show. Convert more subscribers and grow your revenue with Botsy. Go to botsy.com and say you came from the Price Power podcast for 20% off your first year. Back to the show.
So first, like understanding, okay, what are people actually doing? And then how do those feed into your metrics? And I love the idea of inputs to those metrics. I mean, I'm curious your take here. I think a lot of times we less sophisticated teams focus on these metrics and say, okay, how do we move these metrics? We're really need to be focusing on the inputs to these metrics. How do we move these, you know, these inputs that actually influence the metrics? And first, you have to understand what are the inputs, what influence this metric to actually to move this metric. Where focusing on that metric at the end is usually always the wrong path. What maybe like we think about we give some specific examples here of some like a core metric like CPI, cost per install, or cost per trial star for subscription apps. What do you think are common inputs to that metric that are maybe missed, or just like how do you break that down for you or your team to actually focus on?
Mhm. I would say the most common framework or like approach that I use for that is to build a hierarchy of metrics, or it's often called tree of metrics. I think there are, like, of course, the best practices there and mistakes to avoid, but most of the time you can easily get it right if you just put a bit of effort and thinking into figuring out what contributes to a certain KPI that you are working on a daily basis. But let's say if I think about the trial opt-in rate, maybe my first steps towards like figuring out what the problems can be would be trying to answer the two questions. The first one is, are enough users seeing my paywall at all? And the second one would be like, are enough users converting after they see it? So I think these are the two important parts here. Like first, understanding measuring your paywall impression rate. And second, measuring the conversion rate from this paywall, right? Here, the solutions, once you deciphered this a little bit and got some insight into it, the solutions will differ a lot, because if your paywall impression rate from like the first app open to paywall impression is at 50%, let's say, then you can very easily increase already probably the absolute number of your trial opt-ins or purchases just by optimizing your onboarding. So here, the solutions would be around measuring the drop-offs for every screen in the onboarding that you have, like starting with first app open, and thinking, okay, where do users drop off the most? Is there a solution for that? Maybe they don't want to sign up. Maybe your sign-up options are not convenient enough. Maybe they're buggy. Or let's say if we are thinking about the second common problem with enough users are aware of your paid offer, but nobody is still converting. So this is a little bit harder to figure out, but definitely also possible. Like in my head, there are the usual suspects would be to check if the value proposition is clear and if it's compelling at all. So like if your offer makes sense to the user, then I would check that the design and the paywall overall looks trustworthy, signals quality. I think quality plays a big role in here in terms of if users see something that is very poorly executed in terms of design. I think this already turns a lot of people off. And most importantly, how much does the price align with the value that your users expect or perceive so far? And here, again, you can think of so many different solutions to address each of this. So for me, it was at some point, I figured I need a structure for this too. Like, I'm personally a big fan of structuring things. So if you have seen my slides, you probably noticed there was one with the paywall anatomy, because once you start thinking about it, like of all the best practices you come across, of all the things you've tried, then you can see how much you can actually, how many things you can play around with that all play into timing, call to action, messaging, layout structure, like offers, trust queues, and all of that. So there is really like a lot to figure out there.
And I think, thinking about that that paywall impression rate, sometimes I'm curious your take. Sometimes it's kind of a mixed bag where getting a higher paywall impression rate by maybe removing onboarding screen doesn't always work in terms of like increasing your trial start rate, where sometimes qualifying those users more and sometimes there's an acceptable level of drop off of users going through your onboarding funnel, and only the most qualified reach your paywall to actually see it. So how do you kind of think about that kind of that continuum of maybe longer onboardings, qualifying users further, building intent, but actually a smaller percentage are actually having a paywall impression versus having everybody see the paywall, but maybe it's lower conversion rates? Is there a right answer? How do you tackle that?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a right answer. Like, I definitely know what you're talking about. I think it's always about the balance. Maybe even in this sense, mixing your, but I mean, I usually rely on two things. So this is the data that I see, and these would be like the insights that I'm getting from users, right? And only by combining both, I believe you can come up with the good solutions that are more likely to work out than not, right? So like in this example, I think it's definitely not about the number of screens in your onboarding. Like it can be, but not necessarily. And that's why I think here, again, for me, the first step would be to look at the drop-offs on each of the screens, because if there are a few that are definitely causing it, then like high drop-offs in between, then you definitely, like, I would say it's your job to figure out why and figure out if this can be fixed. I think what's completely normal is to see like somewhat high drop-offs on the first screen, especially if you're running like web onboardings and using web funnels. I think another typical drop-off point is the sign-up screen. And here the key is to make sure that you're offering like the best options for the sign-in for your users and that they work smoothly. And the third one is, of course, like the paywall. Like everything is between, I would say, rarely causes that big of a drop-off. But these screens that I mentioned, I think here it's really critical to figure to do this more complex step that I mentioned before, and to break it down by attributes to see is the drop-off on the sign-up screen coming from Android devices or iOS devices, for example. If it's coming from Android devices, then what can be the reason behind it? Maybe it's because we are not offering the Google, like sign up through Google, like random example, right? But this can differ. There can be bugs on different platforms. There can be different user intent coming from different channels. So some might have higher intent and will be willing to go through 100 screens and sign up in the end. Some will not. So I think here it's really about figuring out like what's exactly dragging it down. And another thing here is the insights from users, right? Because we can see the metrics, we can break it down, see the drop-offs, but only users can tell us why they're like not converting, for example, like if we're talking about the low trial opt-in rate. And yeah, I think here the best solutions you can figure out through conversations with them to understand like this is, I think this is way more nuanced than just drop-offs in the onboarding screens. And you really need to figure out like what exactly is the problem, what is off-putting, what are the barriers, why it's not happening.
Yeah. I think your point on segmenting by attributes, looking at drop-off rates not as a whole, but by kind of different attributes is so important. I think that it's such a basic thing that I think people don't do a lot, and you learn so much there. Where it's usually when you're looking at averages for everything, like averages are always wrong, right? They're just inherently that's how they are. And so when you actually break out different kind of attributes, user types, what's someone's goal, what do they answer for that during onboarding? I think devices is the obvious starting point, but there's so much more, right? When something I usually advise not to do, but I'm curious your take is uh, for more complex apps. I think it makes sense, but how do you think about like splitting and branching different onboarding flows based on questions where you see, okay, one user type is dropping off. Do we try to fix the whole kind of onboarding flow for that user type, or do we create a separate branch, for that user type to try to improve conversion rates? How do you kind of prioritize that?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I can't say that I'm a big fan of adding complexity overall. So I probably would agree that it makes sense indeed for bigger apps that already feel like they might be hitting diminishing returns in other areas, and then like only this super solid personalization is the solution. Personally, I think I have not really seen huge successes with personalization myself. I've done a lot of experiments around personalizing the onboarding a little bit and personalizing the paywalls. But when it comes to paywalls, I did not usually see it having a solid impact. Maybe it was a 2 to 3% uplift in conversion rates. But I also think like this is one of the things where the idea might be right, but the execution might be wrong. So maybe my whole anecdotal evidence is pointing to the fact that the solution was just executed wrong. But when it comes to personalizing the onboarding, I think what definitely works is this idea of giving the users reassurance along the way that they're in the right place, and most importantly, that you also understand your users really well. So I can see the point of having this empathy-based, reassurance-based onboardings, where after every few questions you show them, we got you, we're the best app for this problem. We have your back. So I definitely see this working. But to be honest with you, this is as far as my experiments with personalized onboardings have gone. So apart from this, like when it comes to really adding complexity and then personalizing way bigger journey, and especially everything like activation and engagement wise for different segments in the products, like this is something I have not really invested effort in yet.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I've seen similar where I've seen simple personalization work. I think when you try to get too complex, you're kind of guessing. You're not it's not kind of informed hypotheses, and it's too easy to get wrong about what the user actually wants or is feeling. And I've seen, like you're saying, simple personalization based on kind of the question they answered previously, showing a screen that references that question, reassures them, and it's either simple, copy personalization or adding an image that references, what they answered for what goals they're looking to solve. But yeah, I've seen the same. And I think I 100% agree where simplicity is usually always the right answer. Keep it simple. And I think what a lot of people miss is that once you start having different branches and different flows, you're all of a sudden decreasing your overall impact, right? Where when you make an optimization that only touches 20% of your new users, the impact is always lower. Where if you can keep everyone going through the same flow, have an experiment win that reaches everybody, your impact will be higher. Going back to kind of
For sure,
your
this
data analytics.
exposure, yeah, the exposure makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I believe for really like huge apps, I can imagine if especially the jobs to be done in the app can vary significantly, and you can see that, okay, like by asking this and these questions, we can say that, okay, these users definitely fall into the segment and they need this job done. I believe it does make sense, but maybe in most apps I've seen, this like jobs are not so clear cut, and sometimes users also transition between them. So I would really, I think you need to have like a really high degree of certainty that, because it might be very easy to do wrong. Even these simple screens that we put in between to confirm that you're in the right place, even this is super easy to do wrong, because I think there are a lot of apps these days that use this tactic, but mostly like have them as some kind of check boxes to say, you want to lose X kilos by a certain time. Great, we are right here for you, which probably does not add that much value. So I think like even getting this personalization right and delivering value on the screens is also super, super hard to nail, to do right.
Yeah. So you have to test it, have to actually measure it for yourself. You can get ideas from other people and copy other people, but don't just assume that it'll work right out of the box for you as well. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So we talked a lot about onboarding. We touched a little on paywalls earlier, and I think we talked about you gave some tactics for if you have a low trial start rate. And so really there's usually for your paywall, there's two areas. You either have a low trial start rate or low trial conversion rate, which is good, I guess, because we know quickly which one of those areas we're in. Hopefully we're not in both. But it also, there's a lot of different possible ways to fix this. So maybe we go back to the low trial start rate for a second. And do you have any examples you can share there of kind of how you've approached this or what you've seen and then what you've done?
Yeah, I would say low trial opt-in rate. I'm just really trying to figure out usually like the data is clear, but then by understanding like users on the why they are not starting the trial. I think again, only the users can give you the answer about the why. And maybe one of the examples would be back in my days at Mimo, we were regularly doing user research, and sometimes we would do user research covering specifically monetization. And it was quite interesting that among many other reasons, like answers to the question of why don't you start the trial, one was becoming quite a pattern, and it was that by going through our onboarding after downloading the app and everything, users would still believe that it's some kind of a game, that it's maybe a game for kids. So our value proposition of that we were very prominent with on the paywall about becoming a professional developer was not really matching everything they've seen so far. Like starting with the first app screen with our mascot and ending like with the sign up screen or like the onboarding. So clearly what was working for us really well for activation and retention and user engagement was not working that well when it comes to showcasing and signaling quality, depth, because everything looked so easy, really cool, really awesome and friendly. But this user friendliness, was not really signaling the depth. And again, here, the solutions can be multiple. I'm not going to say that doing a rebranding is the solution to increasing the revenue and your trial opt-in rate. But sometimes even this can be, right? Like changing the colors, changing how you talk, making things look a little bit more serious, deep. If your product is about that, even this can already signal higher can help increase the quality and the value that the users perceive, and this can increase your trial opt-in rates as well.
And so it's kind of that expectation mismatch. You're selling one thing during the onboarding flow. You're a victim of your own success. You made it too fun and too easy in onboarding, and then when you get to the paywall, people didn't understand what they were getting to. And so, did you learn that through user research or through testing?
Yeah, a lot of users were simply not sure that that this is the right tool for their job and the job we've been advertising. So a lot of people were coming through our ads was become a professional developer. And then if we would be probably advertising very heavily for the audience of hobbyists that would just love to try out what programming is, I think this would have been a perfect match. But in this case, there is another caveat. We probably would not be able to charge what we've been charging for the yearly subscription from this audience because their intent and their job is might not be worth that much. So I would say, we in the user research, it was regularly popping up that it looks like a cool app for my kids, or this is very fun and very easy and I really love it. But is there really enough content in it for upgrading? Is there enough content for a year? Or maybe I'll run out of it after a few months. So clearly like some value depth, sorry, some
I like the mismatch or a value.
like depth to showcase value was missing. Yeah.
That makes sense. I think you can sometimes get at it by just putting a bunch of screenshots of your ads, of your onboarding flow, of your paywalls all beside each other and analyzing themselves. But usually you need some feedback, some review, something to kind of trigger that thought to just to kick that off. Um, yeah, okay. So let's go to low trial conversion rate. What are the common levers you see here? What are the common causes? And then how do you go about tackling those?
Yeah, probably no big surprise here. I also break it down. So I think there are two ways of two to three things that I would really be looking into. Like first, trial to purchase rate is low. Is it caused by the voluntary or involuntary churn? Because again, these two groups, completely different sets of solutions, right? In my experience, involuntary churn can contribute to churn overall, but it's very rarely a big lever. I personally, I think I have a lot of solutions for fixing that, but I never really saw it have a huge impact. I think what's important here to understand would be your target audience, and if it's maybe skewing towards demographics or countries where the purchase power is lower. So then maybe involuntary churn can be a much bigger lever to pull. But typically, let's say most people cancel because they want to. And in this case, I would really also look into when exactly this is happening, and then do the user research to figure out why, just to double check your assumptions and to validate them. Because what I typically see is that if users cancel immediately, like within from day 0 to, I don't know, day 7 or 14, depending on how long your trial is, or 3, then it's usually because they don't want to enable auto-renewal. They want to feel in control, they don't like being charged, and they want to decide themselves when exactly to auto-renew or not. So I think this is like the main reason behind cancellations that happen within the first day after opting in for the trial. Another thing is that they can cancel right when they receive the trial expiration reminders. And here, I believe the problem is very deep and usually hard to fix. So it means that they did not get the value they expected during the trial. A very easy fix here is if your trial is way too short and users did not manage to get to the aha moment yet, and that's why they cancel. And so here you just can offer longer trials, right? Again, a harder problem is when your trial period is long enough and yet users don't get the value they expect and that you promised on the paywall. So this is bad. This is a lot about activation, and especially activation and short-term retention. And another type of churn, which is interesting, I think, and really worth digging into, is when users actually upgrade from the trial, but then cancel immediately. So this is the category which might be skeptical about whether there is enough content in the app, if there is enough value for the whole year or for the whole month. Again, might be those who don't want to be charged recurrently. And here, there is another maybe breakdown I would also think about, which is, are those other users that believe that they're really optimistic and they will get their job done within a year and they simply will not need your product after that. So this will be your good, happy churners, which is okay, because this is for whom the product is the perfect match. Or maybe you are just simply not communicating the value enough, or there is a mismatch and they believe, okay, simply I'll be done or through this whole thing in a few months and I don't need this anymore. Maybe they don't believe in your approach, like in how you structure workouts or how you teach. And so this is also much harder to fix in this case.
And if you have a bad product that people don't like, that's when it's harder to fix, right? Where that's oftentimes if the product changes are much harder than paywall optimizations and tweaks. And so, there's the common tactic of the trial timeline or trial reminder. And that can help prevent some of those immediate cancellations, right? Where people are worried about getting charged and forgetting. So I think that's a good tactic. I think I remember you suggested that. Um, then activation is a little more complicated, right? I think I've seen that a good a good goal, I think, for apps, and it's maybe a bit simplistic, but is just keeping people in that app for that first session longer. Can you extend it? Can you keep people engaged? Can you keep people doing new things? Can you educate them, continue them with more guidance? Yeah, what else have you seen work there in terms of the activation, kind of decreasing or increasing those trial conversion rates?
That's a very good question. I definitely agree that it's very difficult. Like a lot of the solutions will revolve around early activation and early retention. I mean, you are the author of the retention block. I think you know better. I think you know the best, like how nuanced the topic is. And what I strongly believe in would be one thing is getting users to experience the aha moment sooner. So like decreasing the time to value. It can take various shapes and forms, and again, like to not go back to it, but it can start with really removing sometimes removing the onboarding screens nobody needs to like you said, maybe making sure that making things even like a little bit more complex, but making sure that the users like get the value out of the product. And I don't know if longer sessions would be the metric I would necessarily optimize for. I think this is very hard to again nail down and do right. Why? Because sometimes by saying the session should be X minutes, we can set like wrong goals for ourselves and in reality make everything just way more complex. And the only reason users have longer sessions is because something is hard to find, something is hard to understand. Like this is an extreme example, but I think here it would be about how I would approach it is to look at data first to see what separates users who get to the aha moment from those who do not, and based on this make decisions. Do they follow a different path? Do they have a different journey? Maybe they're coming from a different channel. Maybe their sessions are longer. So this for me would be maybe the first ways to validate it, and then again move on to the qualitative insights from interviews to better understand why. Like what is the aha moment? How is it perceived? Like I personally see that not always signaling value is very helpful. Like you can gamify things, you can make things also like as easy as you possibly can. It does not usually mean that people still like really experience it, even though everybody loves like a nice, smooth, delightful experience.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Like we hope that someone's spending more time in our app because they enjoy it, but if it comes back to what you said about the aha moment, like we need to understand that. What is someone actually getting from our app? What is the value? And I think you've said it many times. User research is so valuable here. Actually talking to your users, like you're saying, and I think a lot of times in consumer marketing, we get stuck in this quantitative mindset of numbers and analysis. We forget there's actually people using our product. We can go talk to them. We can go ask them what they think, and that's so valuable. So yeah, I agree, and it's not a simple thing, but I think you're right. Probably if you don't understand your aha moment, that's probably the right place to start there. Um, Okay, cool. This is super helpful, and I know you have a lot of great examples and break everything down in your presentation. We'll link these in the show notes too, so people can go find that and kind of see all those visuals there. Um, the last thing, we've got a few more minutes. Last thing I want to talk about is pricing. How like how important is to think about your pricing? How big a lever is pricing? Yeah, we'll start there. I have a few follow-ups. Let's start there.
Definitely a big lever, very powerful, massive. So, however, most of the apps I've personally worked with and I would say been exposed to like throughout my career usually start monetizing very cautiously. They're more likely to start with prices that are lower than what they can potentially charge. And I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as a nice way to start experimenting with like how many users you can convert without pissing them off, basically, because very early you usually have very small, very loyal set of users to whom you're providing value, right? That's why I think overall in the industry, it's much more common to see the prices go up rather than some subscription app lowering the prices. We see it, and we maybe to some extent also get conditioned by examples from Netflix or Spotify, which are content apps which deliver very similar amount of value throughout the user experience. And this is a completely separate category from, for example, self-improvement apps or like personal improvement apps. For this, I would say, yeah, it's not very common to lower the prices over time. However, personally, I see it, have seen it a few times in the past as a very valuable and working tactic. It definitely hits your lifetime value. Like, that's for sure. You need to be prepared for this. You need to be ready for this trade-off, and you need to find the balance between the two, between your conversion to purchase rate and getting enough paying customers and the lifetime value. In my head, I see roughly 4 cases when lowering the price makes sense. Like, the first one is when you're charging something that is way off the mental category into which you're falling into the customer's head, because each of us has that. There are products that are nice to have. There are products that are, let's say, painkillers. We are willing to pay different prices for them. A second reason would be that if you never localized prices before, and in some countries they also simply don't match the mentality, the acceptable price ranges, or the payment methods that are used there. Also, lower prices might sometimes simply align with your company mission. So if you are about making something accessible or maybe monetizing through donations, like, I think this is also fair to go this route. And another reason can be is when, again, there is an established category in the consumer's mind and all your competitors have a certain feature parity and deliver the experience that the users expect, and you don't have that. You simply know that a few critical things are missing for that. So all of these that you maybe can get signals for during user interviews or like exploring the market, doing the competition research, together with very low conversion rate to trial and purchase, would signal to me that decreasing the price might be a good test to run. So if your users are well aware of your offer and yet nobody is buying, of course, like, sometimes the way you communicate value can be the thing to fix. So let's say you tell a certain story about your product in the onboarding and on the paywall. So sometimes you can try to fix the story before you actually fix the number, but sometimes you just have to fix the number and then end up with having a solid stream of paying customers from whom you can get more and more data and insights to figure out where to go next.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because everybody just says, raise your prices, you're not charging enough, raise your prices, you'll make more money. But in reality, it's not that simple. And going back to your original point, it's always about breaking down and segmenting and looking at these different attributes. Oftentimes, there's different countries that aren't converting as well, that might not be getting the same value as other countries, or if you're not localized. And so, yeah, I think understanding when actually lowering prices can be a good tactic is super valuable. Um, cool. Well,
Yeah.
um, anything else you want to add? I think it's so informative. All this was amazing, and really appreciate you joining. Um, is there anything you want to promote, or have people go check out? We can link anything into the show notes you want.
Nothing to promote, but thank you so much for having me. And if anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn and talk about it or debate, I'll be very happy to.
Cool. Yeah, we'll share your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. You also run a great course on Maven, so we can link that, and people can put a notification for when you're next doing your next cohort there. Can
Yeah.
definitely vouch for the quality of that. Um, and
Yeah,
this
probably sometime early next year. Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, people can look out for that. All right. Well, this was amazing. I really appreciate you joining, Katerina. So many insights and wisdom, and yeah, looking forward to sharing with everybody.
Thank you, Jacob, for having me. It was really a pleasure to chat with you, as always.
All right. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Please go to pricepowerpodcast.com to see all the episodes. Go to Spotify and YouTube and give us a subscribe and follow so you don't miss any episodes. All right, talk to you next time.